Welcome to Jack Whelan. Thank you so much for joining us from Andover, Massachusetts, all the way to London. Really appreciate you being here, Jack. I'd like to talk to you about being an e-patient and a cancer survivor. You also have a lot of experience working with pharmaceutical companies. So tell us, in your opinion, what this industry needs to do to regenerate itself in the patient's eyes.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul. First, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm sorry I have my Rod Stewart voice today. I don't normally sound this way. It's one of the effects of chemotherapy. I'm back into treatment. I relapsed a few weeks ago, so I'm back into treatment. So that may affect the voice a little bit. But more important, to answer your question, I think there are two key issues facing biotech or the pharmaceutical industry. The first is the distribution channels currently don't facilitate good communications between these firms and their ultimate customer, the patient. So it's very difficult for them to have any kind of meaningful dialogue, and we need to fix that. And fixing that comes from the second biggest problem, and this unfortunately is the most over-regulated or the most regulated of industries. I think many of the regulations prevent the good dialogue or the much needed dialogue that I think that would serve us well. Oftentimes, biotech firms are afraid to engage patients. You don't know what kind of patient engagement you'll get. They want to follow the rules, and the rules right now are pretty well defined about off-brand marketing and other compliance issues that these firms are faced with.
So those regulations originally designed and created to protect patients and the wider public. You're now saying that actually they've gone a step too far. Is there anything specific that you would say that needs to change?
I think there's something that especially we've seen in the US is the implementation. There are many variants around the world of HIPAA compliance, the Healthcare Information Portability. It's a privacy act that protects very important information, personal information about patients, but it also prevents that very important information to get out into the right hands. A lot of epidemiological studies that should be done, that should be able to be performed very quickly. There's a variety of web-based tools that would allow us to collect that data. It's not easy to do. If someone like yourself wanted to conduct a tissue bank, I don't mean a specific tissue bank, let's say you want to do a buccal study, you wanted to get a saliva sample, for example, to do some kind of a genetic or genomic study, the regulations would not allow you to do that, and yet it's nothing more than a cotton swab of saliva. That is very valuable information that should be collected very widely today, and we're not doing that simply because of a regulatory environment.
So what can pharma companies do? What can the average market access manager actually do to become more patient-orientated, in your opinion? First
of all, I think they want to be more patient-oriented. They really want to embrace patients. Whenever I'm given an opportunity to speak to a biotech firm, they embrace me wholeheartedly. And of course, there's compliance issues. You have to sign off certain documents, and they feel very comfortable after they're signed. But I think they should be more vocal. I think they should come forward and defend themselves. All it takes is one or two idiots to give this industry a bad name, but most of them are, good, benevolent, hardworking people. I'm reminded of the student back in high school who always kept his or her head down. They were always looking for the right answer. These are the people that are in the pharmaceutical and life sciences industry today. I trust their integrity, I trust their judgment, far greater than most of the general population in industry, certainly more than the lawmakers that control their work. So I would be more vocal, I would be willing to take more chances. I think our legal and compliance officers are becoming more risk averse than ever before. And I think we need to step back on that. But I think being more vocal and being more willing to take chances. And I know that might scare institutional shareholders, but I do think it's necessary.
It's perhaps important to point out at the moment you're not affiliated to any specific company or in the industry's hand in any way, shape or form. You're just a patient that knows what's best for them. In fact, you've been very proactive in your own journey, haven't you? So why don't you tell us a bit more about that, and also whether you see a trend of more of the kind of thing that you've been doing actually happening, and what might be the implications of that.
First, I'll admit I'm not very objective about the pharmaceutical industry or biotech. I dearly love what they do. I think theirs is a noble industry, and when you are a patient and the benefactor of the therapeutics that they develop, it's very easy for you to like them and to see the good work that they do. So, little history. I was diagnosed with a rare, incurable blood cancer back in 2007. And at that time, all of the literature and Dr. Google and research indicated maybe a 5-year outcome after you began treatment. And so when you're told you have a rare, incurable blood cancer, which is sort of a hybrid of leukemia because it's in the blood, lymphoma because it's in the lymphatic system, and myeloma because it actually starts in the bone marrow, you spend a lot of time learning the game. You know, it's like finding yourself sitting at a gambler's table and you're told you're not going to win. And that was not an acceptable option for me. So I became this crazy man who was determined to learn as much about this cancer. And I think that education was a key ingredient. So part of that is not only advocacy for others, but for myself. I think that the more educated you are about a rare disease in particular, the more likely you can beat it. You can stack the cards in your favor when possible. I learned everything possible because it was a rare disease. It's only somewhere between 12 to 1,500 people around the world are diagnosed with this cancer. In fact, the number may be higher. It's just that many are often misdiagnosed as myeloma because the biomarkers in myeloma are very similar to this lymphoplasmacytic lymphoma called Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia. One of the benefits of getting cancer, you can sound, as we say in Boston, wicked smart with these large words. But I think learning as much as I could to try to put myself in a better position. I've followed every key biomarker. I can often, discuss the cancer with my doctor at the molecular level. My doctor laughs and sometimes gets a little fearful when I talk about the downstream effects of Bruton's tyrosine kinase inhibitor or the effects of histone deacetylation. But I think this was very important. And as far as advocacy, there are so many opportunities for advocacies for patients. I recognize that this is actually part of my medicine. Speaking with a voice for those who might not otherwise have been heard just seems the right thing to do. I think that being very active in legislative circles, our lawmakers really are not experts on this disease at all, or any disease. There has to be a major wholesale upgrade in legislative activities. I think we also need to have a stronger voice for biotech and pharmaceutical firms. These are the firms that employ our people, that pay our taxes, that create the jobs, and they do need a patient voice. And I think the patient voice is one of the most effective. So given the opportunity, I've done this at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts State House and also at the U.S. federal government. I've testified before both houses, the houses and the House of Representatives and the Senate. The idea is to help educate with a patient's voice. Just one thing about the patient's voice. We are no more knowledgeable than the man on the street about research methodology or some of these other things, but we're very knowledgeable about our experiences. So it's always a good idea to keep in mind who you're talking to. To quote that famous American philosopher, Forrest Gump, patient advocates are much like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So,
Jack, one final question. I happen to know that you were a strong advocate of being involved in clinical trials as a patient, and that's indeed where you found a lot of your own solutions. Yeah. What can a senior executive from a big pharma company do to open up clinical trials, make them more accessible to people like yourselves who might actually find that as the solution for them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. The first issue with clinical trials is most patients are not even aware of the clinical trials as a treatment option. I'm reminded of what we see on TV and in the movies. Many years ago, there was a great movie, Love Story, and poor young Jenny was dying of a blood cancer, and rich uncle said, You know, can't we get her into a clinical trial before she dies? And there are so many myths and misconceptions about clinical trials. You're really not a guinea pig. You really get much better care than standard of care. The problem is that 95% of us get standard of care because less than 5% of cancer patients participate in clinical trials. And so then you ask the question, well, why is that? Well, most of us, our first experience with healthcare is with our GP or general practitioner or primary care physician. And most of them never even discuss the option for clinical trials. So what I think pharmaceutical companies can do is actually not focus on patient education. There's certainly some value in educating patients about clinical trials. But as far as to improve the engagement or getting greater numbers of people to at least explore the option, they should focus their efforts on the primary care physician or the general practitioner. I think a strong focused effort in that area would help upgrade this pretty meaningfully.
Thanks so much for talking to us today, Jack.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.